The 2000s was a defining decade for Star Wars games, establishing some of the most cherished games from the franchise that we've ever seen, but none more so than the Star Wars Battlefront series. Well, this year marks 20 years since the release of Star Wars Battlefront 2, without doubt one of the most iconic shooters to grace video games, and today we're remembering it. Because even now, in 2025, there is simply nothing like Star Wars Battlefront. The scale of the battles, watching your favourite heroes and villains hash it out on the battlefield, recreating the best moments from the films, whilst listening to that iconic score blasting in the background. DICE of course went on to bring that spectacle to a new level with their Battlefront iterations, but to many, Pandemic's Battlefront games are still all-timers. And there's many reasons for that, but there's only one place to start. Battlefront 2's iconic single-player campaign, The Rise of the Empire. Let me tell you, as a kid growing up, this was so special, so memorable. Hearing Tamara Morrison narrating that 501st campaign, setting the scene for every single mission as you went through it, and having Order 66 and the Rise of the Empire through that perspective, genuinely, for that time, was unforgettable. Just having it from a 501st perspective, of course known as Vaders Fist, because before we had Filoni's Clone Wars and all these Star Wars projects that would flesh out the events that happened between the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, this was the best thing we got. And as a result of that, I never forgot it. Not to mention that this acted as an accompanying piece to Revenge of the Sith, which also just celebrated its 20th anniversary. You know, in Revenge of the Sith, you saw Ki-Adi-Mundi on Magneto, Aayla Secura on Felucia, Kenobi on Utapau, but here, you get to live in the battles, become part of them, and that helped flesh out the brief snippets that we saw in the movie. There is one mission that will always stand out to me. Operation Nightfall, the assault on the Jedi Temple, aka the beginning of Order 66. Without doubt, one of my favourite missions in any Star Wars games. And look, by modern standards, it's a very simplistic mission, but for its time and for the significance of Order 66, it was amazing. Gunning down the Jedi, those infamous Coruscant libraries that were a pain in the fucking arse to protect, and seeing tens of Jedi just descend on you. As a kid, this was the coolest shit ever. Having to take out 3 Jedi Masters, of course becoming Darth Vader in his prime before he succumbed to the high ground. The Battlefront campaign is simplistic, but at its time, it was every Star Wars fan's dream to follow the 501st through that story. Assembled with the shots from the movie and that renowned dialogue, it was a match made in heaven. Not to mention just how many legendary vistas were visited, seeing Naboo post-Republic, returning to Kamino to shut down a new resistant clone army, the attack on Hoth. The campaign took you to so many different places, and it was just a whirlwind of a thing to experience, and I loved it. I also always appreciate that the space battles in the campaign were optional, and they could be skipped if desired, but it also added to the experience in the story told. But Battlefront 2 is not just iconic because of its campaign, despite how much I loved it. There is one feature that still stands out to this day, that hasn't been recreated since, that defines Battlefront 2. And that is Galactic Conquest. The closest feeling I've ever had to Galactic Conquest since Battlefront 2 has been Helldivers 2, with their galactic map and seeing live stats of every engaged planet and what's going on. I have so many memories of Galactic Conquest because as a kid, you've got all this imagination in the world, and Galactic Conquest allowed you to create your own Star Wars story, and that's what made it special. Your own legendary battles, counterattacks, invasions. I cannot say enough good things about how much fun I had with Galactic Conquest. If you don't know, it was this galaxy-wide mode of you versus the computer in a war to take over the galaxy. So you'd start on opposite sides with minimal resources, so you'd have your basic trooper, one fleet, and then you'd go and expand and go from there. What would happen is, let's say you took your fleet from Felucia to Mustafar. If that planet was controlled by the CIS and you're the Republic, a space battle would occur over Mustafar that I had to win. If I win, then a ground invasion would begin to gain control of Mustafar. You'd then gain credits to spend on upgrades like building a second fleet, buying trooper classes to use in those invasions, bonuses like blaster upgrades, doing more damage, the ability to summon a hero to your cause, added back to tanks for healing. and it would just go on until one side won control of the galaxy. I just loved that. The back and forth of it, the backs against the wall nature, that you're being invaded, you've got less resources, they've got more power with them, and it just felt like, and it added those moments, and that's what I mean about creating your own story. That 1 minute, you're defending your home planet in Camino, the next minute, it's an all-out assault on Felucia. What added to the excitement and the reward was that there was 4 different scenarios to do Galactic Conquest in. Birth of the Rebellion, Republic Sovereignty, Dark Reign of the Empire, and Confederate Uprising. Each that came with their own ending that acted non-canon to Star Wars, but canon to your story. So, if you won as the Republic, Sidious was killed by Mace Windu, Anakin becomes the Jedi Master, and Order 66 never happened. If you won as the CIS, Darth Maul lives, Dooku kills Anakin, and Grievous hunts down the remaining Jedi. So it just created this new story that was uniquely yours. Memorable battles, backs against the wall situations, and that's what made Galactic Conquest an all-timer of a game mode. I wish we got it with DICE's game, but in the fact that we didn't, it remains an integral part of this 2005 Battlefront experience. When you look back at Battlefront 2 now, you can't help but notice its simplicity compared to modern PvP games. Whilst we're out here optimizing the fun out of so many PvP games, Battlefront 2 didn't have character progressions, skins, battle passes, seasons. You played the game for hundreds of hours because it was fucking fun. Even just looking at the character kits, I mean there was 4 factions, but a lot of crossover that a lot of it felt very the same. But I just remember looking at the characters and the classes that you could play as a kid, and I remember just seeing in a toy store the Battlefront collections. It was like this 5-pack of toys, and just falling in love with the designs of them and being so excited. Now, after scavenging around to try and find some, and people will be pissed off at me in how I've kept a couple of them, I've actually managed to find them from my childhood. My 2 favourites were always these guys. We got the Clone Jet Trooper, and I never remember them being this small. Got the Clone Jet Trooper, which I just loved the visors, thinking it was the coolest shit ever. And this guy, the Clone Commander, with his chain gun, and just like remember me how obsessed I was with using that chain gun, just feeling the effects of it all. Got the Droideka from it still. I think that's the Clone Rocket Trooper, if I'm right in thinking. That might be from Clone Wars, I could be wrong on that one. Oh no, that's the Clone Rocket Trooper. But yeah, and then it's just, and I think that was the Super Battle Droid that came with it. I just remember seeing that pack in stores, playing Battlefront 2, and I would play the game for hours, and then as soon as I was done playing, I'd get the toys, I'd recreate those battles, and yeah, as a kid, I cannot overstate how cool it was to be a Star Wars fan in that early 2000s period, with the amount of games we got, Revenge of the Sith, and you get to reenact all these battles from the movies that you've watched in the video game, and just being like, whoa, this is so sick, man. Anyway, you get the point. Back to the classes. It was simple. You had a main gun, a secondary gun, and then 2 abilities, which are often like a grenade slash a damage perk ability or a healing ability. You accumulate enough points, and you can be one of the reinforcements, like the Clone Jet Trooper, or the hero. One part that I appreciated in terms of my headcanon was how heroes and villains were used in Battlefront 2. In that, if you're on Magneto, you're going to be Ki-Adi-Mundi if you're on the Republic side. If you're on Mustafar, you're going to be Obi-Wan on the Republic side. If you're on Utapau, you're going to be General Grievous. And I just always appreciated that, especially when you look at DICE's Battlefront 2 and how that launched, and you could be Kylo Ren on Naboo, and that was never quite right. Obviously, they added more and it changed, but yeah, I always appreciated that aspect of it, that it kind of kept in my headcanon of what these battles would be. We've also gone a long time in this video without mentioning space battles, which of course was a massive step up from the first game. The idea of flying your ship onto an enemy's command ship, planting charges, blowing them up, never got old, and it was that tension of docking, trying to make your way inside to get to the place and to plant the bombs. The space combat was never my favourite aspect of the Battlefront games, but it helped add that spectacle, especially in Galactic Conquest, as you had to win the right to invade by first winning in space. We know, of course, that the planned Battlefront 3 to come after this actually had combat to go from space down to the planet, which sounds insane to me, but man, that would have been sick. I've spoke a lot about my own canon and Star Wars canon, but Some of the best stuff that was in Star Wars Battlefront 2 actually came from the experimental modes that they had in this game, which is that weird, wacky Star Wars that we all know and love. This came from both their hunt modes and Hero Assault. A classic which DICE went on to honour was Ewoks versus the Empire. The Ewoks having a rock and spear, you're up against Scout Troopers, you could do Wampers from the Hoth against the Rebels, you could do Jawas versus Tusken Raiders, Wookiees against Magma Guards, stuff that, you'd see in movies, but it was funny to play these modes and they felt good to play, especially in split screen co-op with a friend or family member. My favourite mode outside of Galactic Conquest, there could only ever be one, and that was the bombastic nature of Hero Assault. Just an all-out brawl of your favourite heroes and villains in the heart of Mos Eisley. It was just chaos. Boba Fett versus Aayla Secura, Grievous versus Luke Skywalker, Anakin versus Leia. Not to mention that as time passed, we got a Sarge Ventress added, as well as a load of maps through an Xbox Live patch. And Kit Fisto, by the way, who could fire these weird balls out. It was so much fun. Forget canon, forget timelines, it was just straight up shenanigans in a cantina on Mos Eisley. Of course, we can't go without mentioning the co-op and online aspect. The Clone Wars series did a lot for making us all resonate with the clones, feel their importance, but before we got the Together Brothers of the Clone Wars and DICE's Battlefront, the co-op experience of Battlefront 2 was it. For its time, there was nothing more sick than one person being Obi-Wan, another a Jet Trooper, and just duoing the fuck out of the map. And of course, the online was very cool for those that had Xbox Live. And as a result, it was a shame to see Aspyr botch that Battlefront Collection launch, because there's so much love and nostalgia for these Battlefront games that it could have had a real moment again, especially when there looks to be no future for Battlefront games right now. But going back to it again, this game just brings back the pure childhood joy within a person, reminding you that there really is nothing like Star Wars Battlefront. Being in Jabba's palace and having to contend with not just the Empire, but the Gamorreans too, the Rancor, and seeing that slimy fat prick that we all love in the middle of the palace. Geonosians helping the CIS in Geonosis, Ewoks helping the Rebels on Endor, it all just added to the display of amazing Star Wars moments. Not to mention that I think Battlefront 2 was a better accompanying piece to Revenge of the Sith than its own tie-in game was. It's crazy to me that even 20 years ago, this formula still stands on its own. The classes, the reinforcements, summoning a hero that relied on the style of risk and reward to extend your time as that hero, having to get kills and not take too much damage or time. The scope of so many planets and arenas, no design around microtransactions, no real meta progression, just straight up Star Wars fun. I genuinely think this game will always stand the test of time. Its narrative that dug into the process and fallout of Order 66 and living it through a clone's perspective. The ability to create your own stories and battles in Galactic Conquest. Playing with your friends both offline and via split screen co-op. That weird wackiness of Star Wars at its heart and its hunt modes and all-out brawl in Hero Assault. The legacy of Star Wars Battlefront 2 is that it's still an all-timer of a Star Wars experience and remains one of the best and most important shooters in video games. But now I want to hear your favourite moments from Star Wars Battlefront 2 in marking its 20th anniversary. Your favourite maps, class, hero, your favourite moments. I want to hear all about it. If you enjoyed the video and hearing me reminisce on it, dropping a like really helps me out. It does a ton. And if you're after more Star Wars content, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing. News, reviews, guides, streams, whatever it might be. If Star Wars games is on the topic, I'm all over it. Other than that, all my socials are linked in the description down below. Regardless, I hope you have a terrific day. Play games, get gains, and may the Force be with you.